Coming up on The Disturbance, I've got my big NFC East National Football League preview show for you today. And yes, we are going to talk exclusively about what some people call the dumpster fire division of your National Football League. And I really think that's a fair and accurate statement when Daniel Snyder, the owner of the Washington Commanders, is the actual owner of the Washington Commanders. Plus, you've got the New York Football Giants, who are still under the impression that they're going to be able to turn Daniel Jones into an actual National Football League quarterback. Then you have Nick Sirianni and the Philadelphia Eagles and Jalen Hurts, a team that is absolutely on the rise and willing to spend some big bucks on a wide receiver and one A.J. Brown. And finally, we will get into the Dallas Cowboys, a team that is still reliving the 1990s as it pretends that it's got a real legitimate chance at a Super Bowl after allowing Amari Cooper to simply just walk out the door. I've got all of that, and trust me, a whole lot more coming up on the big show today.
Live and on tape from the heart of Silicon Valley, this is The Disturbance, hosted by Dave Daba. Now to the host, who can't stop ripping on players, coaches, and unbelievably bad front office management, Dave Daba.
It is the middle of the afternoon on September 3rd, a Saturday of the year 2022. I'm Dave Daba, and thanks so much for tuning into The Disturbance today. All right, so we are going to quickly get into the NFC East, as I mentioned in the opener, if you will, the dumpster fire of your National Football League. Now, we're going to kick off with the Washington Commanders just simply because there's not too much to talk about when you're talking about the Washington Commanders. Is Daniel Snyder still the owner of the Washington Commanders? Did the Washington Commanders make the right name change? I mean, when you think about what they did and what their name was called for the history of this particular franchise, for them to then go in the opposite direction and choose a militaristic name called a commander should tell you everything you need to know about how dysfunctional that Washington Commander organization is. I'm just saying. Okay, so yes, they went out and got Carson Wentz, who is literally about 6 to 12 months away from selling insurance for Allstate. That's how close to the end of his career is one Carson Wentz. Now, to be fair to Carson Wentz, he did a pretty good job being the old quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts last year until he went up against the absolutely vaunted Jacksonville Jaguars. You can absolutely understand why Indianapolis had enough of Carson Wentz after just one season, when all they had to do was get over the Jacksonville Jaguars in the last game of the season to make the playoffs, and Carson Wentz absolutely fell apart. Those pieces of Carson Wentz that fell apart are now head coach Ron Rivera's problem. And I will say super quick that I think Taylor Heineke is probably at some point going to take over this team yet again and will do a decent job keeping this team in and around the 500 mark if that happens early in the season. I can't believe I'm saying that, but scary Terry McLaurin is just that scary, and their defense is way better than you might remember. If you just go back 2 years ago to Chase Young's rookie season, they had an outstanding year with this Washington Commander defense. Better than you might think. Not better than you might think would be the entire New York Football Giants organization. Like, if you were to say on paper, which are the two worst teams in the National Football League heading into the start of the season, and you'd have to say the Chicago Bears, and you'd probably have like the Houston Texans, the Atlanta Falcons, and the New York Football Giants in that conversation. I have my reasons to believe that the Houston Texans are going to be better than you think, And I think it's fair to say that the Atlanta Falcons are not the worst team in the National Football League. And it really will come down to whether or not Justin Fields can actually really get off the ground as a starting quarterback in the National Football League with this new offense in Chicago. That being said, I think on paper, the worst team in the National Football League has to be Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley and the rest of this New York Giants football team. I'm sorry, New York, but Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones have not panned out. Now, I know their contracts are coming up, but I mean, even if they, what is the scenario that you as a Giants fan would re-sign Daniel Jones to a huge contract? What is the scenario in which you would re-sign Saquon Barkley to a huge contract? Look, I love Saquon Barkley, and I hate to put him in the same category with a Daniel Jones, but Saquon Barkley has just been very injury prone, and it's going to be very difficult to throw him a lot of money. Look, there's still a lot of clutter that needs to be removed from the New York Football Giants clog that was caused by the last regime that was there. To be fair to Brian Daboll and the rest of this New York Football Giants organization, this is a new regime that really absolutely deserves 3 years to get this thing cleaned up, because that's probably what it's going to take. Look, Daniel Jones is yet another one of these quarterbacks that came out of college, did a couple things really well, and in the NFL has shown some sparks. I think he had 24 touchdowns in his first season. If they can't get the offensive line correct in New York, Daniel Jones can succeed. It's as simple as that, and it's pretty much as simple as that for really the overwhelming majority of quarterbacks in the National Football League. Now, Daniel Jones, as we all know, can also run the ball, which also makes him susceptible to injuries more than you would like. That being said, this is still a really bad football team. The offensive line is going to get a little bit better than it was last year, but hell, they can't get any worse than they were last year, could they? All right, so then we have two teams that are vying for the NFC East championship, if you will, this year. Now, the Dallas Cowboys won last year, and no team in the NFC East has repeated an NFC East title, and get this, in the last 17 years. I had to go back and look at that stat, and I couldn't believe it, but it is a true stat nonetheless. So just using history and using statistical stats as a way of sort of looking at this, I would absolutely say then you'd have to go with the Eagles. On paper, this Eagles team is actually a little bit better, believe it or not, than the Dallas Cowboys in all three phases of the game. Now, to be fair to the Cowboys, they lost Amari Cooper. They've had some key injuries in the last couple weeks, and they're still waiting for one Michael Gallup to get back officially. No word yet on whether or not he'll start week 1 or week 2 or week 3, or if it will be pushed back a little further. Michael Gallup will be the key to the Dallas Cowboys having a extremely successful season. I think they can still win the division if Michael Gallup only plays in half of the games. Look, the Dallas Cowboys wide receiver core is a little bit better than you think if you've been watching and listening to national media. There's more to it than meets the eye. I love CeeDee Lamb. They've got two outstanding tight ends for this Dallas Cowboy offense. Dak Prescott, I had a chance to get out to Dallas Cowboy training camp in Oxnard a couple weeks back. And while at least 75% of the players I saw have since been cut, Dak looked pretty sharp, as did their offense. And this was, 3 or 4 weeks ago. As for the running backs, Tony Pollard is the guy. I know Zeke's going to get the start. Zeke is, quite frankly, getting close to heading off to the Emmitt Smith Arizona Cardinals as he's entering the last couple years of his career. Love Zeke, just I think he has absolutely slowed down a lot. Finally, the Dallas Cowboys did sign one of my all-time favorite linebackers from the Minnesota Vikings in one Anthony Barr. Anthony Barr, if he could stay healthy, will play well in half of the games that he's in. He's just gotten a little bit old. Look, this Dallas Cowboy team could easily win this division. This Dallas Cowboy team, since the division is so weak, could put together enough wins to sneak in as a wild card as well. We haven't talked about Mike McCarthy. We haven't talked about Dan Quinn. We haven't talked about Kellen Moore. Just simply to say, Kellen Moore is definitely doing better and better and better every year as an offensive coordinator. We know that Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator is an excellent choice. So this Cowboy defense, despite the injuries, even entering into the season, Dan Quinn will find a way to scheme victories for this Dallas Cowboy team, at least on the defensive side of the ball. Despite all of that, Mike McCarthy, no matter what, is still in trouble if he doesn't find a way to get this Dallas Cowboys team to a Super Bowl. Now, moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles and Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni is a hell of a head coach. I mean, I'm just saying. He's got so many great 1- and 2-liners. Just go hunting for them on YouTube when you have a chance. Look, Jalen Hurts is absolutely added, maybe about 4 or 5 inches of muscle in the off season. He looks like he's gone a little bit Barry Bonds. I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm just saying Jalen Hurts looks like he's added a little bit of Barry Bonds into those muscles. The Eagles, as I mentioned, went out and traded for A.J. Brown, which is a sign of an organization that wants to win now. When you go out and you bring in one of the premier young wide receivers, you give him a ton of cash, you expect that your team is ready to win now. This Philadelphia Eagle team is way better than you think and should win the division. Now, they're not as deep as the Dallas Cowboys are across all 3 phases of the game, but they do have one of the best young wide receivers in the game in one Devontae Smith. On the running back side of the fence, you've got Miles Sanders, Kenneth Gainwell, and of course, one of my personal favorites for fantasy football, if you ever get into a bind, Boston Scott usually can get you 10 points in an off week. Look, this Philadelphia Eagle football team, as I mentioned, is way better than you realize. I think Jalen Hurts turned a corner. I think this coaching staff last year definitely turned a corner. Look, they found out something about themselves midway through the season, and they did something that we do here in the Silicon Valley a lot, and we look for repeatable ways to win. Now, really, in the Silicon Valley, that's all about repeatable ways to make money. And in the National Football League, Nick Sirianni and the offense figured out how to repeat certain types of plays consistently, which allowed them to shift the focus from a passing the ball down the field exclusively to a running attack. And they did this, and they stuck with it for the second half of the National Football League season last year, which is exactly why this Philadelphia Eagles team, despite the fact that they got blown out in the playoffs, were in the playoffs to begin with. This, my friends, is what I'm always saying about good coaching. Now, will Nick Sirianni be able to do the same thing again this year? Will they have to change things up in a way if defenses start to scheme against their offensive scheme? And I think that's one of the reasons Jalen Hurts has bulked up Barry Bonds style in the offseason. They will have more flexibility in what they can do on the offensive side of the ball than they had last year, simply because they've got a healthy A.J. Brown, who, by the way, is the best peer catch after best peer guy to catch a ball and then make you miss in the National Football League. Just struggling to say that correctly, but you know what I mean. We just get A.J. Brown, the football, could just be a small 7 or 8 yard pass, and then it's like trying to take down a tank. That's what A.J. Brown is like. That is a huge absolute difference for this Philadelphia Eagles football team. All right, there you go, my big NFC East National Football League preview show for you. When you have a chance, do check out our big sports website at disturbance.live. For The Disturbance, I'm Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing week.
The Disturbance is brought to you live and on tape from the heart of the Silicon Valley and is a production of the Mighty Rip Podcast Network. For more witty, 100% independent NFL and NBA sports coverage, check out our big sports website at disturbance.live.